Hi, I'm Arpita Bedekar from Fintelekt Advisory Services. Thank you so much for joining me today in this video where I'm going to present a summary of the Financial Action Task Force plenary meeting that was held from March 2nd to 4th, 2022. The Financial Action Task Force, which is also known as FATF or FATF, is the international standard setting body in anti-money laundering, countering the financing of terrorism, and countering proliferation financing. So that's AML, CFT, and CPF. And the outcomes of the plenary have a huge impact on regulatory standards and the guidance issued by countries across the world. Um, Over the last few plenary meetings, we have seen a lot of new discussions, new reports being published, especially on different areas of financial crime, and public consultation, which has now become a norm, being opened for new guidance that the FATF wishes to introduce. And this plenary was no different. So here is a quick summary of the outcomes of the 3 days of discussion from 2nd to 4th March. The FATF has issued a statement on the Russia-Ukraine conflict. It has reviewed and revised the mutual evaluation methodology. There is an update on recommendation 24 on beneficial ownership, as well as an agreement on strengthening recommendations 4 and 38 on domestic and cross-border frameworks. Work has already started on a study on the proceeds of the trafficking of fentanyl and other synthetic opioids. There have been two new reports in the pipeline, and a draft guidance opened up for public consultation around the real estate sector. And the FATF has finalized the appointment of Mr. T. Raja Kumar of Singapore as the next president of the FATF for a fixed 2-year term, which starts from 1st of July 2022. And we will go through some of these outcomes in more detail on subsequent slides. Starting with the Russia-Ukraine conflict, the consequences of the invasion of Ukraine by Russia were discussed at length, and that culminated in a statement released by the FATF on the situation. In the statement, the FATF expresses concern about the impact of the Russian invasion of Ukraine on money laundering, terrorist financing, and proliferation financing risk environment and the integrity of the financial system. It is also reviewing Russia's role as a FATF member, and it's considering what future steps are necessary to uphold the FATF core principles and commitment to implement its standards. All jurisdictions' competent authorities are expected to provide advice and facilitate information sharing with their own private sectors on assessing and mitigating any emerging MLTFPF risks which are being identified, and also in relation to virtual assets and other threats to international safety and security coming from the region. The threat of malicious cyber activity targeting financial institutions and systems is also being highlighted. The FATF has also expressed concern that the current military invasion and other activities by Russian Federation may actually inhibit the important progress that has been achieved on AML CFT by Ukraine, and which has been noted in the country's last mutual evaluation. There's also a reminder in the statement about the importance of ensuring that non-profit organizations or NPOs and other humanitarian actors are able to continue to provide the vital humanitarian assistance that is needed in the region, and that the requirements of FATF standards applicable to NPOs are not used to justify intimidation or repression of legitimate humanitarian activities. Moving on to some of the other outcomes, a strategic review of the assessment methodology was started by the FATF in 2019, and it was aimed to streamline the FATF's processes to make the next round of mutual evaluations more targeted, timely, and effective. And that review is now complete, and FATF has finalized and approved the procedures for the 5th round of mutual evaluations. And the important changes that will be incorporated starting from the 5th round is that the 5th round will have a greater focus on risk and context to ensure that countries prioritize their efforts in areas where the risks are the highest. There's going to be a stronger focus on designated non-financial businesses and professions, or DNFPPs. And the next cycle of mutual evaluations will also be significantly shorter, with a streamlined and stronger follow-up process that focuses primarily on improving effectiveness and ensuring that countries that don't take effective actions are held to account. There's also a strategic vision outlined for the global network. The FATF will work to strengthen its partnership with FSRBs. The FSRBs are FATF-style regional bodies. So in Asia, it's the Asia Pacific Group on Money Laundering and so on in other regions. So this partnership actually forms the backbone to the successful assessment and compliance with global AML safety measures. And the strategic vision supports FATF and FSRB's collective efforts to achieve their common objectives of combating MLTF and of fostering effective AML safety systems. The mutual evaluation of France was also discussed during the plenary, and the key conclusion of the mutual evaluation was that France has in place robust and sophisticated AML CFT frameworks, and some of the areas where the country has achieved good results have been highlighted as the use of financial intelligence, money laundering investigations and prosecutions, and the implementation of targeted financial sanctions. At the same time, some scope for improvement has been pointed out in the supervision and implementation of preventive measures for professionals involved in activities of legal persons and the real estate sector, and in improving the monitoring of the non-profit sector to prevent the potential misuse for terrorist financing. So this ME report for France will be published in May 2022. The next part involves the changes to the list of jurisdictions under increased monitoring, or what is commonly known as the grey list. The two important changes this time, one is that Zimbabwe has been taken off the list, and the second important one is that the United Arab Emirates has been added to this list. So now there are 23, we left with 23 countries on this. So these are the countries with strategic deficiencies in their AML CFT frameworks. And the FATF has also updated its statements for these countries under review. So since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, there was some flexibility provided to jurisdictions not facing immediate deadlines to report progress on a voluntary basis. And some countries on the grey list had their progress reviewed in 2021. And for these countries, the statements have been updated, while some other countries chose to defer the reporting and their statements are obviously not updated. In terms of the UAE being placed on the grey list, this was following the adoption of the mutual evaluation report of UAE in February 2020. And the country has been given already a recommended action plan for improvements in its AML CFT regime. And from what we understand, the UAE has already made progress on this by addressing more than half of its action plan items. That includes finalizing a terror financing risk assessment, creating an AML CFT coordination committee, establishing an effective system to implement targeted financial sanctions without delay, and significantly improving its ability to confiscate criminal proceeds and engage in international cooperation. And what you see on the screen are actually areas that it is yet to implement. And these are around mutual legal assistance requests, on the DNFPB risks, on quality of STRs, more resources and additional functionality for the FIU and so on and so forth. And the UAE has been given a time frame to put these action plan items in place. Now let's move on to the strategic initiatives during this plenary. And the first one is a revision to the recommendation 24 and its interpretive note on beneficial ownership. And this was developed after 2 rounds of public consultations over the last few months. And according to this revised recommendation, countries will now be required to ensure beneficial ownership information is held by a public authority or a body functioning as a beneficial ownership registry. Countries will be required to ensure that competent authorities can rapidly and efficiently access this beneficial ownership information, and authorities will have to assess and mitigate the MLTF risks associated with foreign companies to which their countries are exposed. And the important one in this is that the FATF has agreed to ban new bearer shares and to strengthen disclosure requirements for existing bearer shares and for nominee arrangements, which will stop these hopefully from being used for money laundering. The second report is one on money laundering and terrorist financing risks arising from migrant smuggling, and this one is expected to be published on March 22nd, but the high-level findings are already out. The report finds that many countries don't consider migrant smuggling as a high-risk crime for money laundering, and the associated financial flows are rarely investigated. And I believe this is in line with some of the other reports that we have seen in the past around environmental crimes and on human trafficking and modern day slavery, where also associated financial flows being investigated is really the problem area. So this report too identifies the most common methods to transfer and launder the proceeds of migrant smuggling, and it will provide some recommendations and good practices for tracing criminal proceeds and enhancing the effectiveness of money laundering investigations. The last one is actually a risk-based approach guidance for the real estate sector, which is being opened up for public consultation. So this is following the June 2021 plenary where FATF agreed to review the guidance, and it set out a project team which was tasked with making the necessary changes and gathering the relevant information. And what is expected from the public consultation on this draft is comments around any details and specific guidance for practitioners and additional aspects which may have been missed in the draft. Any specific business cases of real estate sector, MLTF risks and threats, and measures put in place by the private sector to address them, so the guidance can be made more helpful and practical, and terror financing threats as identified by any sector practitioners. So comments on this paper can be provided by April 22nd, 2022. So that's really the gist of the outcomes discussed during the plenary meeting. And I hope you found this video summary useful. If you would like to know this in more detail and read up about this, all of this information is available on the FATF website. The next plenary meeting will take place in Berlin, Germany, from June 12th to June 17th. And following that meeting, we will also try to bring you a summary on Fintelekt Academy. So thanks once again for joining me today, and I hope this has been useful. And have a great day ahead, and see you soon. Thank you.